So, for this next segment, we're going to be talking about the Calgary Flames, who, since we last brought on our guest here, Anand Unatan, have made a lot of changes that we talked about them potentially making. So now we're kind of on the back half of all that. We'll be talking about pretty much everything that has gone down in the last couple of weeks, as well as what the team's currently looking like, and maybe looking ahead to what potential moves could be ahead of us. But I think we got to start with the big story that happened. I think it was last week with Elias Lindholm being traded to the Vancouver Canucks for. Ooh, I'm setting myself up for failure here. But Andrei Kuzmenko and defenseman
exactly what name
defenseman Hunter Brzestowicz, I think. Right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Something like that.
Something like that. That's a tough one. Yoni Yurmo, a first round pick and a conditional fourth round pick that could become a third if the Canucks win the cup, I believe. Win the cup, go to the conference. It's one of the two. But
they go to Western Conference Final.
oh, okay. Yeah, that makes more sense. But it was a really interesting trade to watch unfold because it was one that has been rumored for a while. It's kind of strange to look up back on, but I know we were just talking about the Flames game that just happened tonight. We are recording this on Thursday, February 8th, where Kuzmenko scored his second goal as a Flame as he continues to have just an excellent start with his new squad. I'm really curious what both of you guys think about this trade because I think I already have a very positive opinion.
Yes, I mean, definitely a great and positive opinion coming into now the second game that we have seen Kuzmenko. The first one was a power play goal in his first game against Boston Bruins. That one we won 4-1. And then today he rebounded again to score the second goal of his Calgary Flames season. So really fantastic trade by Craig Conroy. I remember sitting at a Toastmasters meeting and remember seeing the trade go down. So I clearly remember it was on Wednesday last week. So getting a second goal 1 week after, fantastic win. Lindholm, on the other hand, with the Canucks, is having a bit of tough time. I mean, he scored 2 goals in his first game after the trade, but today they got shut out by Boston Bruins 4-0. So nothing to show there, but definitely a good trade pick. And then Hunter Brostovich, I've heard he's a great defenseman. He's still developing and playing in the OHL. Horny Yurmo is also having a great season as down in league, I believe, in Sweden. If correct me if I'm wrong, but
I don't actually know, but that sounds right.
yes, somewhere in the junior league, so he's playing that. So he continues to be fantastic. And then, like you said, Simon, once Vancouver Canucks advance down the conference final, we'll be able to see which pick we get. So great return for the Calgary Flames and good package. I am proud of what Craig Conroy did. He did amazing with the trade.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree with that too, because I'm looking at this, and this is kind of like a proof of concept almost in terms of like sell your pieces, Craig. Like do what Brad could not, and just and take your aging veterans who probably want to win a little bit more, and ditch them off this little bit of a sinking ship and try to rebuild and actually build something special. And I think he did exactly that. And I think he got a lot for Lindholm. Like I'm genuinely pretty surprised with the return because, like you were saying, Anand, like there's some like fantastic pieces here.
Yeah.
Kuzmenko is the one that's going to be highlighted right now because he's here, he's producing. It's fantastic. I am especially excited about the meme potential.
Yes. I agree with that.
Kuzmeister. I don't know if you guys follow Nux memes on Instagram, and he'd always post whenever Kuzmenko scored with the Canucks. The Kuzmeister just dicked you. I'm so ready. I'm so ready for that to be a part of Flames culture for the next couple of years. And he just seems like a cool guy too, and he's been playing really well. And I know he's had a bit of a down season so far with when he was with the Canucks. But he was producing at an insane rate last year and has gotten off to a great start with the Flames. And I know the big thing with him was like him and Rick Tocchet did not get along. So new environment, and he's already starting to pick up the pace again. fantastic get for Craig Conroy, I think. And the other thing, the first round pick, obviously also fantastic. It's probably not going to be very high considering it's Vancouver, and they're probably going to do pretty good. But the first round pick is a first round pick. The one thing I would say is I honestly think the best piece in this deal is Brewsterwitz. He is. I was pulling up when I was pulling up some my elite prospects over here to check out his OHL stats, and he is absolutely insane. So his first season in the OHL was last year, and in that first season with the Kitchener Rangers, as a defenseman, let me remind you, 57 points in 68 games. That on its own is kind of insane. But he has taken an even bigger step up this year to where he has already eclipsed his point total from last year. He's at 69 points in 49 games, which projected over a whole season would be 94 points in 67 games. Absolutely insane. Like that's insane offensive production from a defenseman. Like, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, if he is able to turn into something at the next level, like that could be a special piece. Like, he has a lot of potential when I'm looking at him. I'm thinking like, dude, Craig's pulling some strings, and I think this might be the main part of the deal in his head, where he's like, yeah, that Kuzmenko is great, first round pick is great. This kid is what I'm like, looking to build this team out for the next like 3-4 years is when we're going to be really good. He's going to be coming into the league at around that time, and he's going to be something special, I think, if this keeps up.
Yeah. And I agree with that too. I was super excited when I saw him. I've seen a lot of the one comparison I've seen made, ironically, I might add, is to Adam Fox, at least in what his growth kind of looked like as moving up through the. I don't have the advanced stats right in front of me. I wish I did, but I remember just the sort of I'll call it a ladder, or kind of like the growth that we saw from Adam Fox during his time in the CHL. Or I think it was the CHL for him. He could have been college. He seems like a college guy, but I think it was CHL. As he made his way up, it's very similar to what Brewsterwitz. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. I'd feel really bad if I wasn't. But what we're seeing from him, it's been very, very similar. I'm very excited for him. I think based on the style we've seen from him, I think that his ceiling could be as high as an Adam Fox type player, which, like you said, that is exactly what you want from a player like this. But even his floor, there's been some, with how good he's been doing in the CHL, he could probably be up in the NHL at this point with the amount of points he's putting up. Whether he'd be higher than a third pairing defenseman, probably not, but he could easily be up here. Who knows what he could be even next year or in the next 3 years. So I agree with you, Caleb. I think it's a really good pickup. He definitely has the potential to be the best piece we get out of this. I'm very excited for Kuzmenko as well, though. I think he's, so far, obviously, a little bit too early to know. 2 goals in his first 2 games is pretty awesome, though. You can't really complain too much about that. He's been pretty terrific. And you mentioned a down year, Caleb, but even, I mean, if you want to look at a comparison, he's had... Okay, never mind. It's a pretty big down year, but still, 21 points on the season is something that we shouldn't be complaining about with this Flames team. With the amount of point getters that we have below 20, bringing in a guy like Kuzmenko, I'm not complaining.
I also think that was very situational based in terms of like where Kuzmenko was. He and Tocchet were not cool with each other. He was like healthy scratched a whole bunch of times. There's a lot of other stuff going on. So I think that down year you can't solely put on him.
Yeah, I don't disagree. But if we want to move on to a different sort of topic with this Flames team, I think another really interesting thing is just the trade rumors we've seen kind of going around. There's a lot of big names the Flames have on the market. Craig Conroy went on, it might have been 960, it could have been a podcast. Now that I'm thinking about it, I do not quite remember. But he went on somewhere and mentioned the fact that he does not see a single person on this Flames roster that he would not be willing to trade to try and improve the team. And while I think that is a bit of a stretch, because I think we have a lot of young guys that I would see as untouchable, I I still think it shows the mentality that Craig Conroy has, and I think it really does show that even while looking at it, like with what we're used to, with the type of aggressiveness we normally have from the person in the general manager seat with this Calgary Flames team, I think we are seeing that Craig Conroy is willing to pull the trigger on a lot of these moves, and I think there's really three big names now that Lindholm's now gone. There's three big names that people are talking about. It's almost like Markstrom slid into Lindholm's spot, but it's Hanifin, Tanev, Markstrom. And I think the first question I'd open to whichever one of you wants to take this first. Who do you think is the most likely to be moved, and who do you want moved?
Alright, maybe I'll start with first. So the talks right now, if we are talking about non-goaltenders, we'll start with that. Who is likely to get moved? Possibly Tanev. That's what we are talking about. That's the most talked player right now on the Flames roster that can be moved. Obviously, today there were two scary parts for Tanev. He went to the dressing room twice during the game, so that was a little sticker shocker for everybody to see if that injury will prevent him to get traded. But looks like he was all right and he returned back. So Tanev could be a person that's going to be traded. Obviously, he likes blocking shots. He has been a great defenseman. He has elite sticks and elite hands. So we might get a huge package out of him. Hanifin, I'm okay whatever with he decides. I think the general manager Craig Conroy has given him the leisure to decide what he wants to do. Basically, he can decide to resign or stay. I would honestly keep Hanifin so that he can build a skeleton for new guys coming in, especially like Hunter Brustovich, or if we get another defenseman out of the conditional picks. So to keep that, I would suggest we keep Hanifin, trade Tanev, and that's what we likely are seeing. But again, today I heard differently. Hanifin could be also traded because of how long it's been taking him for them to make a decision. They could be speculating a trade move because of how long the time frame is. So at the moment, as it stands, I would see both of them going. But honestly, if I were me, I would keep Hanifin and trade Tanev. Over to you, Caleb.
Yeah, if we want to talk about Hanifin and Tanev, and then we'll kind of loop back on Markstrom, because it is something that's been brought up recently. I think I'm honestly of the opinion of Conroy, get out there, wheel him and deal him, buddy. Like I'm really excited if he can get that kind of return that he got from Lindholm. Why not keep the good times flowing? Because I'm looking at this team, and I know that we've been doing a lot better recently. Game against the Bruins. Hey, look at that. We beat one of the best teams in the league. You can't let that define anything, though. And it sounds pessimistic and it sounds terrible, but it's like we're not good enough to do anything in the playoffs or even to make the playoffs. And we want to rebuild around younger pieces. We've seen one of the most positive developments of the season has been the development of guys like Connor Zary, guys like the recently extended Martin Pospisil. They've really shown up on this team, and it's been the kind of thing where it's like the youth movement is what we want. And as much as I love guys like Tanev, especially, I think you can get a lot of value for him from teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are looking for that defenseman to kind of put them over the top. And I think they'd pay a little bit extra, because I don't even know if you could fiddle around with some like salary retention for the Flames, where they can like retain some salary and potentially get some extra pieces just for doing that, with how screwed up the Leafs are in cap world. But I think, again, like I think you just got to wheel and deal him. I think you're right, Anand. Like I think Tanev is probably like most certainly gone. I think that's the big one where it's like, yeah, he's not coming back, and I'm okay with that. Not to say that he's not a great player, because he's a fantastic player, but I think it's time to move on from guys who are a little bit older like that. And Hanifin, I said on the last pod that we did kind of like a similar roundtable discussion on this, that I said Hanifin would be the one that I'd be most willing to keep, and I still think that's true. I'm still of the opinion that you should try to get as much value for your pieces as you can, and I think if we're really committed to rebuilding, like that's what you have to do. But if they keep Hanifin, I'm not like, oh boy, they should have gotten more value from him. I do think it's The big thing, it's like if you can get him re-signed, I guess is the most important thing, which we were talking about Anand in terms of Buddy needs to make a decision. If you can get him re-signed, I'm okay with that in terms of like I don't feel like we're keeping dead weight. I don't feel like we're keeping some older talent that we should have shipped off. Like I'm okay with that. But I think especially if you're uncertain or if you know he's not going to be here, then he needs to be shipped off because there's no point in keeping him around and then not getting anything for him and having him leave in free agency. Doesn't make any sense. So, to sum up everything I said, wheel him, deal him, Connie.
Yeah, and I think even just to kind of add on to, because I agree with a lot of what you said, Caleb, to add on to that. I wish I had the stats that were more recent up to what we would potentially need point-wise, win-wise, for all of the rest of the season to make the playoffs. But I know back towards the end of January, the Flames would need roughly 94 points to get the final wildcard spot, which would mean they would need 47 points in the 35 games that hadn't been played at that point, which is a win rate of 671, which is pretty much impossible, is what the conversation was being pointed out. Is the only teams able to achieve that were Boston, Vancouver, and Winnipeg during this season. And
So
the Flames.
Simon, sorry
Yeah, go
to
ahead.
but right now, after the win today, we are sitting 1 point out of the wildcard spot, the second spot for wildcard spot. We are right now, if you're talking, 1 point, so 54 points we have right now, I believe, and so right now we have 53 points. We are one spot out. Nashville and St. Louis Blues is ahead of us. So if one of them loses, we could possibly go into the second wildcard spot. And then we have Los Angeles ahead of us with 56. So possible to enter that wildcard spot again, but it's going to be challenging and difficult.
Yeah, it's definitely, well, that's for sure. I think the main reason I wanted to bring up that stat was though just to show how difficult it would be. I think, which is why I kind of land more on the pessimistic side and why I was a very big fan of the Elias Lindholm trade. And I think I kind of agree with you, Caleb. I think you clean house. I think if you're Craig Conroy with the trade that you were able to get for Elias Lindholm, you're showing what the market looks like for these players who are on expiring deals. I think you get rid of anybody because it really makes me wonder what the market for a player like Hanifin would be, especially if
Yeah.
I mean just think about the amount of money you'd have to give him. It wouldn't be as much as you would probably think. I think Hanifin could potentially be signed for around like $6 million, which is not that much for a defenseman like him. And I think I don't know. I think he's the type of player who you can get fairly cheap for his skill level. I think the Flames would get a lot, is what I mean. Tanev
Yeah.
is a little bit more interesting to me. I know I've heard rumors about the Flames potentially getting a first round pick for him. I'm not as optimistic.
Ooh, no.
Yeah, I feel like there's a chance we get a prospect, maybe a second if we're lucky. I feel like that's more what a trade package for him looks like. But the thing is, I'm still very open for that. I think we'd still be winning the trade if we got another very, very good prospect, very realistic NHL guy in the next 2 years, and a second round pick. I think that's a win for Craig Conroy, and that just continues to add to how great he's been as a general manager so far in his time. He's made a few mistakes that you can nitpick, but I think he's done an excellent job. As for Hanifin, I agree with both of you. I think if you can keep anybody, you keep Hanifin, obviously. I think he's the youngest of the group. He is probably has the most potential to continue growing and to potentially add to a Flames team that could be contending in 3-4 years, depending on how things go. But I also think that if you can trade him for a prospect, a first, maybe another pick, you do it. I think you get rid of him, and it's just what that package ends up looking for Hanifin that I think, in my opinion, determines whether we keep him. But or at least if I was in Craig Conroy's shoes, but obviously I'm not. We'll see what he ends up deciding to do. If you guys want to move on to Markstrom, we can do that because he's been the conversation that a lot of people have been talking about. Obviously, I think, like you mentioned, Anand, it's been Tanev that a lot of people are predicting to be the next gone, but Markstrom is the big conversation. He is the big money fish that everybody's aiming for right now, and I think we could potentially see him moved at some point before the trade deadline. And it's gonna be interesting to see if it happens. That's for sure. I'm curious what both of you guys think. I mean, what that trade potentially could look like, what it could mean for this Flames team.
So for Markstrom, I don't know what the return could be, because he, like we said earlier in the show, he's had an on and off season. So last year off season, this year he's been fantastic. So I don't know what the return package could look like. Devils most likely is the team that he could land in because they are in need of goaltending. Other teams, I don't know if he'll go and join his best friend Elias Lindholm in Canucks
I
or
don't know
where
about
he
that.
goes. But yeah, I don't know about the return package, but there have been two angles to the Markstrom trade so far. There are people who want him to stay so that he can be skeleton and a mentor for Dustin Wolf, and that's one call. The second angle is that we trade him, get a good high pick, high draft, and all that, and then keep Vladar and Dustin Wolf. Again, Vladar can be rusty at times. He hasn't started all so many games, so he has been rusty. I don't know how much useful he can be for Dustin Wolf. So, and then Eric Francis was interviewing Jacob Markstrom today, and Jacob Markstrom said now it's basically up to Calgary Flames to decide whether he gets traded or not. I'm not gonna do anything. Although keeping in mind Markstrom has a 2-year non-move clause, so if he decides to waive that, he can, or if not, he can stay with Calgary. So he said it's gonna be up to the Calgary Flames, Craig Conroy, whether they want to trade him or not. And then, yeah, we'll have to see. It's going to be an interesting next few weeks, or even next couple of days. We'll have to wait and see. But I want to say we trade Vladar, keep Markstrom just for that skeleton for Dustin Wolf, and then later look to trade Markstrom if we have somebody settled in. So, yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah, the one thing that I would push back on that in terms of helping Dustin Wolf develop, if you trade Vladar, it's a little bit more of my point will be a little bit less salient, but if I'm looking at in terms of Markstrom helping Wolf develop, you gotta at least let one of those guys go then, because Markstrom could be helping Wolf right now, but he can't because they have too many goalies. Where they have Markstrom and Vladar, and he's not going to be able to, like, if we don't make any moves in goaltending, and we're saying like we got to develop Wolf more, he's not going to get any development more than he's already gotten, because he's like, we've had this conversation on the pod before, but he's dominated in the AHL. I think he's basically done at that level. And he needs to find time to develop at the NHL level. We just don't have space for him right now because we have Vladar and Markstrom. And so, well, I think the point you made at the end is good, Anand, in terms of like trade Vladar, and then you can bring in, you have space for Wolf, and then Markstrom can kind of mentor him. But I also think that, so in terms of that angle, it's okay in my eyes. But I also think you're not going to get like anything for Vladar. Like the return, if we're thinking in terms of the conversation that we had about Tanev and Hanifin, where we're like, get as much you can get as much return as you can, draft picks, prospects, rebuild this team from the ground up. You're not going to get that with Vladar. If you trade Vladar, you're not good. You're like 5th round pick, 6th round pick, 7th rounder. I don't know. You're not going to get very much. With Markstrom, that's where I could see 1st round picks start to fly in there. I could start to see like decently high level prospects coming into play. And that's what would be a little bit more exciting. I do think it'll be interesting in terms of, I know Markstrom's got a big deal, and you mentioned the no move clause. It's another kind of hurdle they'd have to face. I think if they make a trade, I think indications are that he probably will waive it if they want to trade him. But yeah, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking the best future for this team, not necessarily the best now, because we've been trying to stay in the best now for the last like 5, 6, 7, even longer years, and that hasn't worked. So I think, well, your point is good in terms of like we'd be taking a little bit of a risk in terms of putting Wolf out there with just Vladar, and seeing how that tandem kind of sinks or swims, and then maybe Wolf's confidence gets shot a little bit because he doesn't have that experienced, like, really good veteran to fall back on. I think that's a risk you have to take just because of what you could get for Markstrom, and then the playing time that Wolf would get. I think the worst thing you could, I think the worst thing you can do is not trade either of them, and then Wolf doesn't play at all. I think the second best thing you could do is trade Markstrom, get a huge haul, and then Wolf plays a little bit more. And then I think if you trade Vladar, that would also be okay. But I'd prefer to ship Markstrom out of here, just in terms of a pure you for him kind of standpoint.
Yeah, and I don't think I disagree with much of that either. One thing that you brought up, Anand, that I really like the idea of is the trading him potentially to the New Jersey Devils, who currently right now are not in a very good position goaltending wise. The hockey writers, that's what they're called, just made a article, I believe it was 2 days ago, ranking all the teams. New Jersey with their goaltending, New Jersey's landed flat on 27th, which for the type of team that they are and have the potential to be, that is pretty bad. And I think a goalie like Jacob Markstrom could completely turn that around. They don't have a single goalie on the roster over 900 save percentage, which is pretty depressing, despite the talent that they have on that spot. Caleb, if you want to jump in, you can.
I just said yikes.
Oh, okay. But it's been pretty rough over there in New Jersey, and I think a player like Markstrom could really add to that. Another thing that makes it, I don't know what their cap situation as a whole looks like, but looking at it just for the goalie position, the highest paying goaltender they have currently is Vanacek, who is currently making $3.4 million. It's obviously a bit expensive for a backup, but nothing that you can't deal with. And I think they have a lot of players that they could send us over. I would personally like to see more prospects than real talent. I've seen a lot of people say that we should try and get Meyer. We should try and get one of their more talented defensemen. I think you try and just aim for prospects. You maybe see if you can get that first round pick. I think because of his flimsy track record and inconsistencies at time, that first round pick feels a little hard. I feel like at least the second round pick has to be assured. So I think if you can get a good prospect, maybe two, and a second round pick, I would be very happy with trading Markstrom. But if because of his past you can't get at least a second round pick, I think you trade Vladar and you try and do exactly what you said, Anand. Have that Markstrom Wolf duo for the rest of the year. Give Markstrom the chance to try and mentor Dustin Wolf. Honestly, I just want to see him at the NHL level. So far this year, it's been kind of like he's been too good for the AHL, not good enough for the NHL, but I really, really, really think that if you give him enough time in the NHL, he'll work it out. I think I don't think it's a skill issue for him at this point. It's an experience issue, and the only way you get experience is by working at it. And I think if you are missing out if you don't bring him up, that's for sure. And I'm trying to think of what other topics we had going into it. I think we were gonna quickly touch on how the Flames are doing right now, which if we still want to do that, we can quickly go around the room quickly here. What do you guys think are your expectations now? Pretty much a month away from the last time, Anand, we had you on the podcast to talk about the Flames. What do you think has changed since then? And has your expectations for this team going into the end of the season, really? We're starting to get pretty close to it. Has anything changed for you?
Yeah, we have played 51 games so far, and about 82 games left in total, so that brings us around 30 roughish games left. I am impressed with this run, especially after the All-Star break, especially with Kuzmenko, the trade we talked about, and look to see what young guns we can bring. There is Peltier now, who's bringing the energy, Kevin Rooney as well, and Cole Schwinn, Walker Duher, all those AHL rookies shining. Stillington is back. I like that. Even Pachalvi, or Pahal, or how we pronounce his name, the claim from Vegas Golden Knights. He is being amazing too. So I would say I like this team. I would love them to try for a playoff run, obviously, but it's going to be challenging, a little bit difficult going into. We are one spot away from, like I said earlier, from the wildcard spot. So we'll have to wait and see. Maybe I'll give it a little bit, couple more games before I make a infinitive decision on if we can make it to the playoffs or not. As of right now, with the streak how they're going, 3 wins back to back so far against Blackhawks before the All-Star break, and now Boston Bruins and tonight New Jersey Devils.
Yeah.
Good chances. So yeah, let's keep our fingers crossed. I like the team. I like the new energy. But again, if we were to get high draft picks, I'm supportive of that too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Caleb, do
and
you
I
want to give
think I
yours?
yeah, I think the big thing from me would be I'm looking yeah, I'm looking at this roster and I'm looking at the position we're at, and I know technically we are only 1 point out of a wild card spot, but I do not. That is probably the last place I want to be, because that's where we've been. We had a very similar conversation last time you were on, but it's like this kind of limbo position is not a fun position to be, and while we are only 1 point back of a playoff spot, it is also important to note that a lot of the teams either in front of us or near us have games in hand. So the Kings have 3 games in hand. They've only played 48. The Blues have 2 games in hand. They've only played 49. The Kraken have a game in hand, so they can easily overtake us again. The Coyotes, well, they're 4 points back of us. They have 3 games in hand, so that gap can close pretty quick if they start winning. Similar thing with the Wild, where they're a little bit further out, but they have 1 game in hand. We've played a lot more than the rest of the league, so we'd have to still be pretty consistent in terms of winning a lot and hoping other teams don't, to have a chance to get in the playoffs. So, and with our whole conversation about what the strategy should be around the trade deadline, I'm thinking if we're selling off a lot of our pieces, the most important thing for me is getting young talent in the lineup, and I honestly don't care about what happens after that. If we make the playoffs, cool. But I'd honestly be a lot more excited if we're able to secure a little bit of a higher draft pick. We're at the point where we're too good to be picking in the like top 5 or anything around there. But anything up to like 6 and below is in range. Buffalo would currently have the number 6 pick, and they're only 5-6 points behind us. So that's kind of what I'm honestly just saying, like, start the rebuild fully. I'm not necessarily saying fully tank, but it would be nice if we had a high draft pick, but overall focus on developing the young talent. Whether we make the playoffs or not is not going to be an indicator of success this season, because we're not built for that yet. And I'm not saying it's not going to come, but I don't think we're built for it yet. And I think if we're able to get a high draft pick, and if we're able to just at least see some development from young players in the lineup, like we've seen a little bit in the season already, that's kind of would be my goal, and that would be my most positive takeaway from the season, as pessimistic as my whole speech has sounded.
Yeah. And I think there are a lot of things to like about this team. I think a lot of the things that I do like, though, are related to the young core. And I think I agree with you, Caleb, and I think this is the same way it went when we had this conversation pretty much a month ago. I think both me and Caleb are more pessimistic. Anand, you're still really hoping for the playoffs, which I think is a possibility. I personally, I think this year I want to miss. I want to miss and get a high draft pick because I really like this draft class. I think that if we get a really, really good pick this year, we could be looking at maybe not next year. It could be next year, but I think in 2 years down the road, we have the potential to have a really good squad. And I think that revolves completely around whether Craig Conroy can get me Tij Iginla. Because if he doesn't get me Tij Iginla, I will be so pissed off. I swear to God, if we do not get this kid, I will be so mad. Because he is having such an incredible season with the Kelowna Rockets that I think that if we do not somehow, if he is not wearing a Calgary Flames jersey at some point to start off his professional career, I will be so mad. I will not be able to live with it. Caleb, earlier in the segment we recorded prior, you spoke on how you would feel if the 49ers won the Super Bowl. If he ends up in any jersey that doesn't have a big flaming C on it, that is my 49ers Super Bowl. Craig Conroy needs to draft this kid, and I will be so pissed if he doesn't. I really hope he does. But I think that's kind of just at this point, that should show you what my opinion of this Flame season is as of right now. When I'm looking forward to a prospect that we haven't even drafted yet, but we will draft him. Craigie boy, help me out here.
We will, Craig. We will.
Craig.
We will.
We will draft him, Craig. But I think that's all the main things I wanted to hit on. Thank you, Anand, so much for coming on again. It's always a blast having you on to chat Flames with you. Make sure to check out Anand everywhere that he is. I know you have your own show. I've been on it once. I hope I can come on it again because it is an absolute blast to both watch and be a part of. So make sure to go check out Anand on both Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. Are you anywhere else that you want to shout out?
LinkedIn and Threads and Blue Sky. I'm everywhere.
Oh, okay. Yeah, make sure to check him out
go.
everywhere because he's a big friend of the show and we always like having him on. But make sure to stick around for the next segment. We definitely have something interesting coming up next.